Afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out on an afternoon during this rather crazy week. I know, my house alone, we're juggling illness and canceled classes. It was bananas this morning, and I left wearing brown and gray, which I know doesn't go together, just to give you a sense of how the mornings. It works. Good. Try to set a new trend here. But it's also gratifying to see everyone come out and talk about cinema as a topic for inquiry, for teaching. And I hope that by the end of the afternoon, by 2:30, we'll have had an opportunity to have a conversation amongst ourselves about what things we do with cinema in the classroom, what works, and perhaps what doesn't work, and aspects that we would like to talk with our colleagues about in terms of solutions. So my role here today is a little bit more complex than I actually thought it might be, in that I have to perform the segue into the workshop portion of our meeting. But that's okay. I think I'll be able to handle it with your help. So my name is Jeff Thompson, and I teach in the Art and Art History Department, and I teach contemporary art and film studies, for those of you who don't know. But I know most of you, so I'm assuming you do know. This is in no way my didactic pronouncement regarding how to teach cinema. What I wanted to do today was talk about essentially my philosophy of teaching film as material, something about its formal dimensions, something specific to the building blocks that I use in my classroom to get students to approach film, as simply a product of a particular set of circumstances, both technological, both in terms of artistic innovation, as opposed to interpretation. I'm going to assume that we're all cineasts and we have interpretive skills. And we interpret film in our classrooms appropriate to the class, in essence. That's not where I'm going to tell you anything you probably don't already know. But what might happen in the course of our conversations is we get into some aspects of interpretation, and that will be fine. Our students, however, I think, on the whole, are master consumers of media. They are remarkable in many respects. But what they lack, I firmly believe, is visual literacy, a kind of critical interpretation of that field of media, film, and moving images which inundate their daily lives. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is talk a little bit about sort of how you address that, and then I have an exercise called a shot-by-shot analysis. Perhaps some of you have performed one of those before, perhaps not, that I find to be a great way to kind of jumpstart this critical thinking with regard to the film and the filmic image. So without further ado, let's begin. I'm showing you here an image of what is soon to become a rather antiquated and ancient mode of film viewership, that is collective viewing in a theater. It's a shame, really. I have a statement on collective viewing on the handout that I just gave to you, which is a handout I usually give to students in any class that I have where film is a component of class material. And essentially, it's my diatribe regarding two things. One, how to take film seriously as text, what kind of questions one asks of cinema, what kind of investment one takes with regard to film in terms of multiple viewings. And then finally, collective viewership, which is about a state of heightened concentration. The film will move on without your input, without your ability to pause it, thus requiring a kind of investment on the part of the viewer. Now, in reading through some comments you guys offered up before this session, I know that many of us have trouble with student attendance in collective screening events, and perhaps that's something we can talk about as we go forward. those of you who don't require it, let's say like a lab in the course of your description of what's online, might want to do so if it becomes necessary. I tend to require screening, require collective viewing as a matter of course, but that's dependent upon the class that you're teaching and your needs. So let's talk a little bit about this issue of beginning to think and preparing to watch. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the moving image for most of our lives has been a mode of kind of escape and the opportunity to shut down our critical thinking skills and enjoy Housewives of Beverly Hills for all of its worth. What becomes interesting is the way in which we break free of that passivity in the classroom and attempt to motivate active viewership. And part of that has to do with the preparation one makes before dealing with the film in class and before having students sit down in front of a screening. And a lot of that is about motivating a kind of set of practices, note-taking, research, and reading before dealing with the film as a text. That's built into a lot of classes on film as part of the natural course of things, but often when we're using film as supplemental material, we don't have time to do that, and that's something that perhaps we want to talk about in the conversation as well. Because one of the things that becomes interesting in that preparation is navigating the fact that movies are literature, they are the plastic arts, they are music, they are dance, they are theater, and even architecture. So they exist in the state of a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk multiplicity. I don't think I've ever used that phrase before in my life, but and that kind of overlapping, which is I think remarkably difficult to navigate just casually. And so preparing students to do that, and I'm showing you here, of course, this great image from Utamaru and his 5 Women, which is really a film about the intersection of arts, theater, drawing, body adornment, and then, of course, ultimately cinema. So this multi-directional aspect of cinema is something I think we initially have to recognize. The other aspect that is important is acknowledging that the film industry depends upon technology, and it is both a technological enterprise as well as a commercial and economic one. And one of the things I think that's difficult for students to grasp is that products from different time periods are manifestations of the conditions in those different time periods related to technology and related to commercial exchange. And so, showing a silent film from the Soviet Union, for example, is one thing, as opposed to the latest film from a couple of years ago out of Hollywood. So those kinds of differences are something we should acknowledge as well. But talking back to the movies is something that I wanted to address, because I think it deals directly with how we interpret subject matter and meaning in cinema. Interrogating the film at its most basic level, all the way through to its most complex ideological, social, and narrative implications is something that I know I like to try to get students to do from the very outset. And this issue of talking back to the movies is really about recognizing things in films about which you want to ask questions. That's as simple as it is. Elements that strike you as unfamiliar or perplexing, which points stand out to you that are either confusing or questions that become quite elementary to the film. Why is it titled the way it is? Why does the movie start the way it does? Why does it conclude the way it does? Many of those questions I've put on your handout are related to this aspect of talking back to the material in front aspect of film that I think is sometimes difficult to communicate is just exactly how one takes notes in dealing with cinema. People develop all kinds of shorthand for taking lecture notes, etc. But in cinema, there are innate difficulties with a one-time screening opportunity. You know, how do you both watch the film? Sometimes you're watching films in foreign languages that you need to be reading as you watch them. And note-taking becomes particularly difficult in that context. So the answer, ultimately, in courses that I teach, is multiple viewings. I know that it's something that students balk at. For some reason, we think that if we let this film wash over us in some capacity, we have absorbed it all in the course of the hour and a half or 2 hours that we spent with it. Trying to exhaust the possibilities in the film in terms of your notes, annotating and working in depth with the image is something I think that we have to emphasize if we're going to make the most of using film as a text or using film as a kind of central focus in any of our classes. And I have some thoughts about how sort of best to kind of motivate that practice in the course of the presentation. Another component of this approach has to do with visual memory and reflection. So, simply put, how does one, in the course of thinking about cinema, reflect on what they have seen? I don't have any hard and fast answers on how this is done for every student. But one of the things that becomes, I think, imperative with respect to teaching film is asking students to think visually as opposed to narratively, as opposed to interpretively. So what does that mean? Well, for example, and I'm glad Professor Scott is here today because I pulled this image specifically for her. The Battleship Potemkin offers a sort of encyclopedia of ways in which the filmmaker is asking us to think visually. The visual frame and its composition in depth are paramount to meaning in the Battleship Potemkin. The relationship of a mother and her injured son, framing the presence of the troops at the top of the stairs, the relationship of the mother to those troops, the hierarchy that is established by the staircase. One might call it a strategic advantage on the part of the military. Just that image alone tells you a great deal about the scene that's unfolding in front of you. Reflecting on that visual material is part and parcel about how imagery produces knowledge. So, other sequences with regard to facelessness, diagonal, sort of animating the composition simply as a single shot. Another dimension where visual information and reflection open up meaning. And then finally, of course, the circle is complete, as I've chosen, hopefully, in a way that demonstrates this kind of movement of composition. Cossack troops move down, once again, from lower left to upper right. Their shadows cast in front of them as they kind of sweep out the population on the Odessa steppes. That's a basic, but I think important demonstration of exactly how visual components, composition, placement of figures in the scene, the orientation of the camera angle, can all be aspects of knowledge production. And often, the very thing that students discount in the process of watching a film. In other words, the point, the narrative content is what they focus on, as opposed to the way in which that content is produced. They assume it's transparent, they assume that it's coming at them and washing over them in a very direct way, but it's really ultimately the product of a very important sequence of images. And that is, at the most basic level, sort of the heart of cinema. Another thing we might think about is a phrase that was developed in around 1912, where cinema was called the seventh art. That phrase, the seventh art, is really a way for all of these dimensions, narrative, form, sound, editing, to come together to equal something that we might consider to be art and art content. How that develops is part and parcel of the exercise that I want to share with you today. How does one derive art from cinema? And it's specific to an exercise called the shot-by-shot analysis. And I have two handouts that I use in class in order to generate this visual reflection in the context of cinema. So take a look at this. Please ignore the due dates. This was from last fall. You don't have to turn these in on November the 24th or whatever date is listed. And I have one more handout that follows. Let's leave one on each table. I should put these on different color paper. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was talking to me. I love every installation, but it shows how.
Yes. Absolutely. I think it's doing very good.
Yeah.
Well, there's two different ones.
There are two handouts related to the shot-by-shot analysis. One is the exercise itself, and the other is how one might go about formatting that exercise. Yeah, do you count? Sure. I have plenty, actually. At this point, I'd like to shift gears to another presentation format. And that is one of the ways I was inspired by a student to sort of create this, this demonstration of a shot-by-shot analysis for you as a point of departure for our conversations, which I'll talk about in just a minute. I chose Inception because it's remarkably it's a remarkably cheap and confusing attempt to generate. It's remarkably confusing. But there's a phrase in it that stuck with me that I thought could be appropriate to our discussion here, and that is shared dreaming. One of the ways, of course, in which cinema is often discussed is through psychoanalysis and a link between the darkened theater and our own dreamscape, if you will. And that's really the only reason I chose this as an example. I mean, there's a panoply of great world classics that could have been used here, but I'm going with Inception. And it's got some good explosions as well. So, yeah.
Just a basic question.
Yeah.
If you have an assignment like this where students are breaking into groups, working on their own, trying to analyze, how do you make
the film available to all of them? Because I have, on DVD, on hold at the library, that's, I guess, probably that one DVD of that film,
Yeah, I do it actually in three ways. One is, making sure that we have a copy on reserve at the library. The other is I have my own library, so I have a copy of every film that I assign, so they can also check it out for me. And then, what's becoming more stunning with each passing semester is the availability of free BitTorrent rips of just about everything that has ever been produced. I'm not saying put that in your syllabus, but I keep hearing from students that I was like, you didn't check out the film here, and I see that it didn't leave the library. And they're like, oh, well, we saw it on online.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, great. The other thing that I do is that every film that is part of the course is screened, I guess, publicly, or there's a required screening. So, there's a multiplicity of strategies. I wish it was as easy as having a kind of library of streamable titles, but that is yet to develop. That's my ultimate dream, is to have that as a kind of on reserve library that we can use. Yes, Laura?
On that same topic, so you require one screening, a public screening together?
Yeah.
And then do you require second and third screenings, or do you just leave that up to them?
I leave that up to them. I don't provide for those multiple viewings, but it becomes quite evident if you work with film as sort of the central text, whether multiple viewings have taken place. And that's really where the evaluative aspect of the course comes out. The quality of the writing, the amount of detail, the richness of their analysis, the quality of their interpretation. I think it all becomes quite clear.
It would be hard to do the shot by shot without having
Yeah.
Well, now I'm glad you mentioned that. Part of why this exercise I think is productive is because it enforces those intangibles that we can't quite put our finger on in the context of just lecturing about a film or using it as part of our course material. I know it's basic, it's sort of a rote exercise, but it really does yield after the kind of material investigation. It really does yield greater interpretive depth and whatever else you might want from students in the course of your own class. So it might involve something like the following. So if a student were presenting their shot-by-shot analysis, this is not always the case in every class, but in many that I do ask them to present it, it might unfold something like this, where you have what's called the scene. So let's take a look. We've got the boom box. Actually, this is called a block rocker, in case. Okay, the scene starts, sorry.
We use a fraction of our brain's true potential. Now, that's when we're awake. When we're asleep, our mind can do almost anything. Such as? Well, imagine you're designing a building, right? You consciously create each aspect. But sometimes it feels like it's almost creating itself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like I'm discovering it.
Genuine inspiration, right? Now, in a dream, our mind continuously does this. We create and perceive our world simultaneously, and our mind does this so well that we don't even know it's happening. That allows us to get right in the middle of that process.
How?
By taking over the creating part. Now this is where I leave you. You create the world of the dream. You bring the subject into that dream, and they feel it, they're subconscious.
How could I ever acquire enough detail to make them think that it's reality?
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right? It's only when we wake up that we realize something is actually strange. Let me ask you a question. You never really remember the beginning of the dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
I guess, yeah.
So how did we end up here?
Well, we just came from the,
Think about it, Ariadne. How did you get here? Where are you right now?
retreat.
You're actually in the middle of the workshop right now, sleeping. This is your first lesson in shared dreaming. Stay calm. never just a dream, is it?
It's never just a dream, is it? So we'll turn to Al, actually, for the breakdown of pop psychology. One of the things, of course, and that's also interesting about this is the way in which the dreamscape, the image, is broken down. So see, there's method to the madness here. In the course of her realization that she's dreaming. So breaking apart the image is what we're going to do in the course of this exercise. So what a shot-by-shot analysis tends to do is break down either sequences or single shots into separate categories. So for instance, the first category might be a kind of cursory statement about what's going on in the shot. Cobb and Ariadne are sitting together in a dream at a cafe talking about the job Cobb is offering her. B, medium shot, eye level. So thinking about the basic presence of the camera as a component for transferring this information to your eyes. I think thinking about that constantly is a way to, I, both destroy your enjoyment of cinema, and B, to begin to really think about how cinema is communicating to you. So medium shot, eye level, over the shoulder. And the camera movement has a slight zoom with each successive shot. So thinking about the way in which that sequence is unfolding. Lighting is another component of the analysis. Backlighting from the right side of the shot. Sound, Cobb and Ariadne dialogue about dreams and how extraction works, whatever that is. Non-diegetic music in the background as they talk. Diegetic, a term borrowed from Lit Crit, simply meaning sounds with no visible source. So soundtrack, orchestra, etc. Diegetic sounds would be sounds with a visible source. And then ultimately, the transitions are a shot-reverse shot pattern from Cobb to Ariadne during their conversation. There are other details one could extract from a single shot, but that's the beginning, essentially. And the process of the sequence is to move through each of these set pieces. So in other words, the edited image, the shot construction, Cobb explains how inception works, Ariadne is learning about shared dreaming and why architects are needed, medium shot, eye level, slight camera movement, etc. Lighting appears natural with the source from the left side of the shot, dialogue, along with background music, the sound of people talking, the sound of traffic. Shot by shot sequence number 3, shot is looking down at the table, Cobb is drawing, close-up. First close-up we've had in the sequence, extreme high angle, close-up of the table, no camera movement, natural light from the top of the shot, dialogue of music, sounds of traffic, cut back to Cobb and continuous shot. This could go on and on and on, and I do. More. I'll make this available via Google Drive for you to peruse. But it's just an example of how rote this exercise is. But at the same time, the types of things that you can generate through this exercise that become, I think, endemic to thinking of film as material. And that's really ultimately what I wanted to communicate to you guys today before we take a break and move into separate groups. And I do have discussion topics for those separate groups. But the reason I'm stopping short, ultimately, is related to something I said at the outset. Teaching cinema is multidimensional. We all have areas that we find fascinating about the medium. From my perspective, though, building a firm foundation in thinking about these types of details, I know it sounds like I'm a formalist, I'm actually not, but in this role I am being a formalist, but it allows for, I think, a greater appreciation for the modes and methods that artists take in this most collaborative art. It's very difficult to say that a director does this or an actor does this, a lighting designer, set designer, etc. To break down what ultimately happens in the course of a particular shot or a particular shot sequence. So there is where the art lies ultimately with cinema. So, having read many of the comments that you offered in signing up for this session, I wanted now to kind of segue and move into what might occupy us in smaller groups. And one of the most, I think, provocative things that was said, one of the most interesting questions I received was whether or not this summer's Star Wars film will be better or worse than the Hobbit trilogy. Just endured. And I really have no firm answer, Eric, regarding that currently. But questions like that really, I think, get to the heart at times of what occupies us when we think about cinema. Am I going to enjoy it? Am I not? But that's not really why we're here. One of the things that seemed to occur consistently in comments that all of you made were, in essence, ways that cinema can be used in the classroom. And I've kind of boiled them down to the three most consistent ways. One, short clips to enhance lecture material. Two, film screen to supplement course content. So you're teaching a particular novel or play and you see a film version of said novel or play or something along those lines. Or perhaps a documentary very specific to a topic you're engaged with in a class. And three, film as focus, film as text. What does it mean to center your analysis on the film alone? And then four, the last 15 minutes, I would hope there would be a wrap up and an opportunity to dialogue amongst groups. So what I would like us to do is spend 5 minutes per group discussing these three different ways in which film is used in the classroom according to the questions and statements that you guys made in the course of filling out your form. And then we might, at the end, sort of come together and have an actual cross-group dialogue. I can mediate, I can answer questions from my perspective if you might find them useful or not. But in order to generate kind of interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary conversations, I think we probably could break up into groups of, how many people are here? Maybe groups of 4, 3? Maybe there'll be a group of 3 and a group of 4. So, you guys want to sit?
Table by
Yeah,
table.
you should table this.
Yeah, table by table.
Table by table. You guys want to do that? This is where I'm at. This is where I'm out of my depth. I'm in no way a kind of ACS workshop facilitator. So
I'm leaving in 10 minutes, so I teach at 1:30, so it's, yeah.
okay.
So table.
Oh, that's okay.
So Liz is,
Yeah, I'll be alone.
you'll be alone, you can.
Well, could I just